Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Wish you all a very happy Mother's Day. All you mothers out there, you've got an amazing role to play. Wish you all a very, very happy Mother's Day today. Welcome to a brand new podcast from D Live. My name is Anjali, and I'm a low carb nutritionist. I'm also a volunteer in the D Life community. D-Life is the only award-winning LCHF and keto community striving to help as many Indians as possible to reverse their diabetes and overcome metabolic disorders. Anup Singh, the founder of D-Life, was recently awarded the prestigious Icons of India by Outlook Media for his work in establishing and educating the Indian community on low-carb dietary approaches. Our community has over 250 plus success stories of diabetics who have reversed their health problems and are off medication, leading a metabolically healthy and happy life. Apart from a community, D-Life also has a diploma course on low carb nutrition for those who are looking to pursue the specialization in the low carb nutrition field. This is the only legally tenable low carb course in India. D-Life is also planning to launch a 3-month certification course in June 2021. You can read more or join the community via www.dlife.in. Before we get started, I'd like to say that the points discussed here are not to be construed or taken as a substitute for medical advice. We recommend you to switch to a low carb dietary approach under the guidance of your doctor or a certified low carb nutritionist. We would also like to add that these podcasts are done voluntarily for educative purposes and do not have any financials attached to it. So, our guest today is Sirisha. Welcome, Sirisha, to our show. Sirisha is the mother of Srishti. She was a 10-year-old type 1 diabetic child. She was diagnosed with her condition at the age of 4.5 years and has been following a low carb dietary lifestyle for the past 4 years. Her HbA1c is currently between 5.3 and 5.8, despite being a type 1 diabetic. Sirisha is an engineer with PG diploma in patent laws and has worked in a legal firm. She recently got certified as diabetes educator, where her primary aim is to help parents like herself understand diabetes and its management, especially in children. She has also finished an online nutrition course in NFNA education and is currently pursuing diploma in nutrition and dietetics. Welcome, Sirisha, once again. We're very, very happy to have you on our show. I think we've always spoken about type 2 diabetes and a lot of other stuff. We've spoken about obesity and all of that, but we've never had a chance to, speak about type 1, especially in terms of children. So we'd like to help, or we'd like your help to understand, what exactly is type 1 and how different it is from type 2.
Thank you, Anjali, for this wonderful opportunity, and thank you to DLife, dlife.in. Uh, I'm very happy to be here, and a very happy Mother's Day to all the mothers here. Mothers play a very prominent role in managing type 1 diabetes of children. So it's a privilege to be connected to people on this special day. Coming to the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes, they basically type 1 happens when the autoimmunity immune system destroys the insulin producing cells in the pancreas. So as a result, the children, or it's often seen in children, as a result, they'll have to be dependent on external insulin. So this is very much different from type 2 diabetes. There is still a stigma in India relating both type 1 and type 2 diabetes, which has to be broken by all of us with proper education. Excuse me, Anjali, I'm not able to hear you because you're muted. Yes.
I'm sorry. Yeah, like I was saying, type 1 and type 2 are polar
Yes.
worlds apart, right? And one can really be dangerous if not considered or supervised properly. So, tell me a little bit about your and Shrishti's story. I mean, she's one brave little girl, from what I understand before we
Yes.
spoke, the earlier day. I mean, please share with us your story and Shrishti's story.
Sure. Shristi is a very active child. We do not have type 1 diabetes in our family. We have never heard about it. We have a little of type 2 diabetes in my parental things in my parents, but we have never ever heard that a child can get diabetes. So she was 4.5 years old when she was suddenly showing symptoms of diabetic ketoacidosis, like frequent urination, extreme thirst, and we also observed very sudden loss of weight. She looked very weak and thin. So we were assuming that she was not eating well, probably. So she was losing weight, and probably we thought it might have been UTI. These were all assumptions, and we were thinking in a couple of days everything will get normal. We went to relatives' place where she was extremely thirsty, drinking lots of water and everything. So initially, what we thought was because she was drinking a lot of water, she was using washroom often, but that was not the case. Suddenly, in a midnight where she was crying uncontrollably, there it struck to us suddenly that she might be dehydrated, and that is why she is drinking a lot of water. So what is the cause of this extreme dehydration? We couldn't understand. My husband, he was away. I was updating him on the phone. He has a little knowledge. He's a scientist by profession. So he said it could be type 1 diabetes, but I did not know anything about it. So we went to a pediatrician. The test was done and it was 720 mg by dl. So that number, like, we barely know what is normal. We know like something 80s 90s or something like that, and if it is one above 120 it's diabetes, but we didn't know what is this 720. We were shocked, and the pediatrician timely guided us to go to pediatric endocrinologist. And then from there, it's a complete, our life has turned completely different. It's a total different story. Suddenly we were in the hospital. We were learning about carb counting, insulin doses, how many times to check, how many times to give insulin, measuring everything. Like, we didn't even know what is how much carbs is there in the foods we are eating. So there it was like totally overwhelming. I'm sure this must be the same situation for all the type 1 diagnoses that happen. um, then it was totally devastating. We came back home. We started managing it. We were also meeting people with people we were seeing online, some groups we were seeing. We were meeting, having some meets, regular meets in Hyderabad. We are part of Sweet Souls Group Hyderabad. It's an NGO organization. So what we have understood, that everyone's diabetes is so different, and everyone's approach is so different, everyone's management is so different. But if one has enough knowledge, and if one know the right techniques, they can manage it better. Suppose a person having 9A1C can bring down it to 7A1C by making small changes with good knowledge, and with good support. So that is when I thought I would be able to help people. And we started talking to people, and trying to figure out how things work. Obviously we are not substitute to medical advice, but we were helping out people as and when we can. I also thought to do a diabetes educated course, so that I'll have also the credibility and proper knowledge to guide people to the proper direction. So there my education started. And then I went to NFNA. I did online nutrition course, and I'm doing from IGNPI. So the message here that I want to share is to the parents is there is unlimited knowledge that we'll have to gain. This is like an ocean. So parents should be able to grasp and learn as much as they can and teach children so that they will also be able to take better decisions. We cannot completely depend on the healthcare providers saying they will take care of everything. We just need to follow it. It doesn't work like that, especially with type 1 diabetes, because every moment it is different, every day it is different, and every day we cannot get in touch with healthcare providers. So that is why knowledge is very important.
Absolutely, absolutely, and especially when it comes to kids, it becomes all the more critical to understand what they're, because they're like literally active every single time, or
Yes.
you need to keep a constant watch. Especially as someone who was like 4 years, 5 years old when Shrishti
Yes.
was diagnosed, it was really, really tough.
She would suddenly go for play. She wouldn't come back when I call to check sugar levels because she doesn't know much about it. Then she didn't know how to express in the language as well. So we had to be extra vigilant. There are also kids who are diagnosed at even younger age, as in like months age also. It would be very difficult. The only thing that helps here is to be on the top of it all the time.
Absolutely. So you told me that Shrishti's been on this low carb, dietary approach for 3 years, 3+ years now. So how did you actually get to know about it? Was it something that you adopted from the start, or was it something you came to know about later on during your research as a parent to understand more about T1D?
We came to know later on. Initially, we were doing the type 1 management like everyone else. I don't say there is one particular way of managing diabetes that is the best way, but we had certain lapses when we were following certain protocols. For example, my daughter was getting very high sugars post meal, and she was feeling very lethargic in the school. She was not having enough energy for her daily sport activities in which she was very active previously, and like loss of concentration, focus, and everything. So we were giving a very healthy home cooked food like what we all eat, but that thing is somehow not working for her with respect to blood sugar levels. So we were in a dilemma whether we should have a compromise between healthy food and a healthy blood sugar. Because if we are giving this kind of healthy food, sugar levels are going beyond our targets, or should we just forget about it and focus on healthy blood sugar? So it was a compromise situation. Things were not. We were like a plateau. We were stuck at a place where we couldn't even bring down the A1C down, further down from 8 or so. So I started researching. I started posting in the support groups and all. Her insulin requirement was also very high. This when we were doing 50 to 65% of the calories coming from carbs. So that is a usual recommendation. So I'm not saying this doesn't work for everyone, but I'm talking about my case where it was not as effective. Then I came to know with some support groups from some parents and all that there are other ways of managing it. Then I came to know about Dr. Bernstein's diabetes solution. So in that, it was an eye-opening. It was not just about diet; it was about the entire subject about T1D. He talks about the exercise, how to manage exercise, what is the pathophysiology, what is how it works in healthy individuals, the phase 1 insulin, phase 2 insulin. It was entirely total subject. I never ever imagined there is so much behind it. Then we started slowly reducing the simple carbs. The fast acting carbs are the carbs that spike the sugar levels immediately. Basically, the first thing was to remove the sugar and junk from the diet. We don't call it a diet anymore. We don't call it a diabetic diet. We call it a way of eating, right? That is how we also ate. We also removed sugar and junk. So that is how it was. And then I came to know eventually that the 80 to 180 range that we thought was good, but we were not able to maintain 75% of the times in that range. We were above it most of the times. So this 80 to 180, which is there, that is as well a little higher than what a human body can, a normal human body should try to maintain. So I realized 180 upper limit is on the higher side. So it should be like 150, 140, and then we came to 130. So we started bringing it down without causing hypos. That is where this our entire knowledge comes into picture. How to dose for the food, how to maintain ranges, how to correct high sugar, how to correct low sugar. There is a lot of things in that. You just don't, change your diet and magically everything will happen. It does not. There is a lot of work involved into this. So this is how we started. We didn't want to go against anyone or anything, but this is what has worked for us. This is what has been working for us. So even now our ranges are in, we try to maintain near normal ranges as much as possible.
Brilliant. I think for a type 1D, like I said in the introduction, maintaining a range of 5.3 to 5.8 is just too good, just too good. It's like you're just normal. You don't have any issue or any health problem at all, right? So that's actually
Yes.
amazing. So while you were doing this transitioning, from mainstream where everybody says carbs is your main, you have to maintain 50%. I'm sure you would have come across a lot of myths, lot of warnings, lot of
Yes.
roadblocks in your journey. So can you just share what was it? What were some of them that you had to really break through in order to get things streamlined for your daughter?
There are a lot of myths I can talk about, go on talking about, but I will address some of them. The first thing is kid needs carbs to grow. Okay, so the growth is dependent on the nutrition profile the kid is having, right? So the kid might be having very good nutrition from a variety of vegetables, from a variety of protein sources, and the vegetables and the nuts and seeds and everything, these also have carbs. It's not going carb free. So everyone says like you're going zero carb in the sense, what everyone thinks is roti, rice, idli, and all these are carbs. But rest all are carb free. They can be eaten freely by people with type 1 diabetes, but it is not. They are also having considerable amount of carbs, for which we give insulin. And for protein also we give insulin. So that is first myth. And the second myth is brain needs carbs. So upon further reading about this, I was thinking, if brain needs carbs, then I'll have to give carbs. Then I realized that brain needs glucose, not carbs. And the glucose is made by the body. The glucose is made by the body from the carb sources you're giving, from protein, from fats, or whatever it is making, it's glucose. This is called gluconeogenesis. So my daughter has been into several activities. She's a blogger, she's a writer, she's into sports, and her brain has no effect on this. She's perfectly active and sharp. The third myth that I would say is high protein damages the kidneys. So this is a myth, because healthy kidneys take as much protein as you are able to give. It is not, there is no evidence saying healthy kidneys cannot take so much of protein above this limit. There is nothing like that. This situation probably comes in where a person is having chronic kidney disease, CKD. In that case, they would probably want to reduce the amount of protein they are giving, that too after reconfirming how much the person is taking. In India, the amount of protein that people are taking is always almost less. So if they are taking less than 0.8, then there is no need to make any changes. If they're taking more than that, probably they may want to reduce the protein. And people also get confused between the protein that comes in proteinuria. It's a starting stage of kidney disease, and the dietary protein. Both are not same, both are different. That is because kidney is damaged, the protein is coming out. It does not mean the dietary protein you're eating is the problem. So that is one myth. And another myth, from where it has come, I don't know. It says if you, the more insulin you give, the better child will grow. So there is no truth to this, because insulin should be given as much as required. In type 1 diabetes, if you give more, it causes hypo, right? I'm sorry, I'm listening, I'm seeing messages that some network issue is there. Am I audible?
Yes, now you are. In between, I think there was some disturbance.
Okay, now I am audible, right?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So we were talking about the kidney and more requirement of insulin, right? So as we give as much insulin as the body requires, this is called basal insulin. Basal insulin is as much, it should be as much. As the child grows, it increases. And as the puberty and other hormones, the basal increases. So that we should give as much. But when it comes to the insulin that is coming with simple carbs, or that is coming from sugar, the direct sugar, that can be reduced. If you reduce that, nothing happens to the growth of the child. Growth of the child is dependent on amount of protein the child is taking, and the nutrition that the child is getting from. So this is a myth saying you have to give a high amount of insulin, so you have to increase the carbs. This is a reverse kind of thing, which is not true. And then there is something called decay happens if you reduce the carbs. So this is a total myth, because diabetes ketoacidosis, the ketones that come here is different from the in the nutritional ketosis. Both are totally different. And if there is a time later, I may explain about it in detail, but that I want to consider as one of the myths. And one more is, if you give a child the fat, the foods from calories from fats, they might get obese. So this is one of the myths. Obesity is a result of calorie surplus from any of the sources, right? It's overall calorie surplus. It's not just calories coming from fats alone. And if someone is having very high carb food with a lot of sugar, that is a calorie surplus, and the child is not active, then it might cause obesity. But if someone is reducing the simple carbs and adding protein and adding good fats, you cannot say the child is getting obesity. And they also, many people also correlate insulin resistance, saying if you give a lot of if you give fats from the diet, they might get insulin resistance. But here people need to understand is that the insulin resistance, which is pathological in type 2 diabetes, that is different. That is from the fats that the body is making. That is not dependent on the amount of fat, dietary fat, that you're eating. There is a disturbance in that mechanism somewhere, that this is happening. And the amount of fats that a type 1 eats, and if the type 1 is getting insulin resistance for that amount of fats, it is temporary insulin resistance. For example, today, by any chance I gave a little more higher fats than she's used to, she might get a stubborn sugars at a later point of a time, which might be difficult to control. That is temporary. Tomorrow I don't do that, it will be normal. So do not mix up insulin resistance of type 2 to insulin resistance that is temporary in type 1. It's a myth. And bones become weak is also a myth, because when the person is taking ample amount of protein, there is no, the bones are getting stronger, not weaker. So I think I've addressed some of them. It's like nutrition, the sugar, the ketones, a lot of things are mixed up into this. And it's called a fear of unknown. Like, oh my god, so many eggs you're eating, eggs cause cholesterol. That has been debunked, right? The dietary fats is not the cause of heart disease. That has been debunked, but still people fear it. People fear about the egg yolk. And if they have a reason to do it, then it's fine. If they don't have the reason to stop it, and if it is not causing calorie surplus, I don't think it's a problem. And kids also, kids might they might say, people might be thinking that giving low carb to a kid is like forcing them, giving something and depriving them of something. It's not. It could be, when you show the kid how the sugar levels are with this particular type of food, you create varieties in this particular type of food, then kids are used to it. They don't they don't feel deprived, or they don't crave for something that you're not feeding continuously.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think sometimes it is easier to train kids than retrain an adult is
Definitely.
what I feel, because I think it's we people who create all the rules saying you need to have only idli dosa
Yes.
for breakfast, you need to have rice and roti for lunch, and you need to have something lighter for tiffin. But ultimately, I don't think it really matters to a body. End of the day, you give it the right nutrition, and that's all. It body only looks at carbs, fats, and proteins, and it just
Yes.
digests it accordingly. Doesn't really differentiate between any of these. Very
Yes.
true, very true. And I think kids are very perceptive. They understand, like you said, if you show a child how it works, they're very, very perceptive. Brilliant. So, more than LCHF, I think you have adopted LCHP, which is low carb, higher protein, rather than focusing just on fats. Because she's also a growing kid, right? So I believe you
Yes.
focus on giving more protein. So how have you seen this impact her blood sugar levels, and also in terms of insulin dosages? Has it kind of helped bring it down a bit, the amount of insulin that she's got to shoot in versus other normal kids out there, other
Yes.
type 1 kids?
Yes, definitely. The protein usually spikes very slow. It raises sugars very slowly over a period of time. And dosing, we should also dose for protein. It's people think that protein is a free food, but it's not. They might be having higher doses to cover the carbs and higher basal rates and all. But usually, if the basal is set properly, one would need to dose for the protein as well. So this one principle that Dr. Bernstein said, that we always keep in mind, saying it is very difficult to match two sharp peaks. The peaks we are talking here is the peak of the spike of the fast acting food. It's very sharp like this. And the profile of the fast acting insulin is also like this. So it's very difficult to match two sharp peaks. They always be a little, they are little apart. So that way you see higher than required postprandial sugars. But it's easier to match two shallow peaks. So protein is spiking slowly, and if you're taking a slower acting insulin, or you set in a pump such that the insulin is slower acting over a period of time, both of them, the chances of matching them would be a lot more. A lot of time is spent, is matching them. So in that scenario, the protein helps in stabilizing the blood sugars. This is the reason. And we also, about the insulin requirements coming down. Yes, protein needs half of the insulin that is required for the carbs, but over a slower acting period. So in that case, the insulin doses will be reduced for sure. And as I said before, the basal insulin is as much as required. That wouldn't come down. That is as much as required. But the bolus that is coming with the covering the fast acting carbs, that is reduced. As a result, the total daily dose might get reduced.
And just also wanted to know what could be, or will there be issues for people when your insulin doses increase? Meaning, for somebody who's on a slightly higher carb and they have to keep injecting, because that's typically the advice given, right? Okay, if your carbs are high, then just add on more insulin. So Are there any health hazards people need to be aware of with as and when your insulin count keeps increasing, the amount of insulin you need to increase, shoot in? Is there a health hazard or any issues attached to that?
I would say yes, because the more carbs you're giving, and that too more of the simple variety carbs you're giving, the more are the doses. When there are more, when the doses of the carbs are on the higher side, then you will have to look and manage them very carefully, because at some point that might end up in a hypo, and then you might have to again carb up, and then it might go high, it may come down. This we call is a roller coaster. So this roller coaster is damaging to the health over a long period of time. So that is the reason why we have something called standard deviation. So standard deviation is maintaining the deviation in narrow ranges. This happens with the low carb way of eating. Also, there is something called law of small numbers, which means if you're giving small amount of carbs and small amount of insulin, then even it is the sugars are stabilized for sure, but then even when the hypo comes, hypo might happen. The hypo, the correction that you have to give to bring up the hypo would also be very small. And if a hyper happens, the hyper also happens in a small intensity, for which you will need a little insulin to bring it down. So even though there are some fluctuations, it happens within the narrow ranges. So that way, immediately you will have the effect that the person is feeling very active and healthy, and there is no chasing highs and lows, and there are also no large fluctuations. So long term good health.
So basically, what you're saying is carb tends to, or the higher carb food tends to bring in these roller coaster, like high spikes, stages of high spikes, and then complete hypos where there are two extreme reactions by the body, and that will actually make it
Yes,
very difficult for the person to manage their,
yes, definitely.
health and how they manage. Cool. So this is relatively less, so this is kind of almost flatlined with a low carb approach.
uh, we would say, see, flat, it's not completely flat, but as I told you, it's between the narrow ranges. And there are some instances where they have sickness, there are hormonal changes, there are adrenaline rushes, and all those things. It might spike up, but they give small corrections to bring it
Those
down,
are
and they
exceptions.
almost neatly land up into the things.
I think those are
Yes,
exceptional
otherwise
cases.
it's fine. And also here I would want to, yes, and also here I would want to say some people consider, having a flat line is like a dead person. So the person, just like ECG, you should not be having a flat line. I don't know. This is very weird because, uh, I mean, the essence of this telling that this is that they mean to say the people who are eating low carb is not eating a variety. They're not having a life. They're not playing anything. They're just sitting and maintaining the sugars. Sugars is everything for them. I would consider, add these also into the mix, because the children are doing everything. They're doing sports. They're going to the party. They're eating. They're eating the alternatives. They're doing every other thing and still maintaining them in the ranges. We don't call it a inactive person, right? The person is
Absolutely.
active and maintaining good ranges.
Absolutely. Very true. Very true. So, just going back a little bit to what you had mentioned earlier on diabetic ketoacidosis, can you throw a little bit of light on this? Because anytime you mention keto and diet and diabetes to any doctor or a nutritionist, the first thing they'll warn you is be careful, you can end up with diabetic ketoacidosis. And then there's a huge scare as to, you will end up with hospital emergency and all of that. So can you just shed some light on what that is, and when is it that we should really be concerned about such a situation?
Yes, DKA is for sure dangerous, diabetic ketoacidosis, and people also get scared a lot about it, because that is how our kids are diagnosed with T1D. Like I told you, the symptoms of Srishti, she was having extreme thirst, she was having very high blood sugars, and she was losing weight. That was because high amount of ketones that were causing the blood acidic. Okay, so this happened in the initial stage because the body was lacking insulin, because the beta cells are gone, she was lacking insulin, and in that stage she got this DKA. So even when the person is after diagnosis as well, someone taking high amount of insulin, and if they miss a dose, an important dose. For example, someone is giving insulin for 80 to 90 carbs, and then their basal requirement is also very high, and somehow the insulin did not work for them. It did not go into the body, or somehow the pump malfunctioned. Then what they enter up in within a few hours, some people go overnight into DKA because their body lacked insulin. So this DKA is because of lack of insulin causing extremely high sugars and making the blood acidic. The ketone level will be very high. And now the people talking about ketones with a low carb diet, the ketones are called nutritional ketones. Not everyone have these ketones, but some people who are doing as low as 30 to 40 grams of carbs per day, they might be having a small amount of nutritional ketones, but these are totally safe because nutritional ketosis itself is a safe range. They don't lose weight, they don't have symptoms, and they're not dangerous. For someone to go from nutritional ketosis to DKA, they have to go to starvation ketosis, and then they have to go to the diabetic ketoacidosis. This is a very long process, which takes about days of very strict carb restriction. So how do you think this will apply to a person with type 1 diabetes who is eating carbs, good amount of carbs in the low carb as well, and who is eating ample amount of protein, which is high protein, which also causes gluconeogenesis, and who is also taking suitable insulin, who is maintaining good blood sugar levels? This happening of DKA is very, very negligible. I would say this myth should be entirely opposite. It should be opposite. The people who are following low carb, high protein diet, the chances of decay are so negligible. The chances of decay are with people who are taking very high doses of insulin, because any small error can end them to be hospitalized.
Wow. Okay. So I think that clarifies a bit about the DKA, and your point is very valid, saying it should be more of a concern for those with insulin and those having,
Exactly.
high carb, rather than those wanting to switch to a lower carb. I think that
Yes.
the risk of DKA is very, very low. Excellent. Now, I'm sure, you know, Srishti must be having quite, because he's saying every meal you need to monitor her insulin levels and all of that. So, how did you manage these insulin doses at home and school, and even the entire process of, pricking herself, injecting herself every single time? It would be so painful. It's you
Yes.
thinking about it makes me think, oh God, it's such a painful process. So, I mean, Shrishti must be experiencing that every day. How did you manage that, or how are you managing that?
It is indeed very painful for the parents as well. In the initial days, we were having tears for every prick we are doing and for every injection we were giving. It is there, but we also know that it is important. It is very important for her survival, right? So we also made her understand in the little brain that she can grasp, that this is very important. We cannot ever skip it. So we did not hesitate to give insulin as and when required. And our aim is also not to reduce the doses all of a sudden. There is nothing about it. We wanted to maintain it. And she was on MDI, which is multiple daily injections, for about 6 months. And then we shifted to insulin pump. So we shifted to insulin pump to have a flexibility for her to take her bolus doses in the school. So having said this, I'm not saying insulin pump is the only way to manage, is the best way to manage or control type 1 diabetes. It is not, it's just an insulin delivery system, just like your pen does, insulin pen does. But here, since we wanted the flexibility to change the basals during her night when she was having spikes due to hormones, and we were wanting to let her have independently take bonus doses, this came into our rescue. So I used to put stickers on her boxes. We used to print at home stickers on her boxes with the blood sugar ranges and the amount of insulin she has to take. So the first range will be the actual carb count of that particular food, and our aim is to always maintain in that first range. And then if she was having a little higher sugar, in this range, this is the insulin you should take. This range, this is the insulin you should take. So based on that tabular form, she used to take the insulin. And she also, I'm saying used to because it's a pandemic and it was since last year the children were having only online schools. So, and she also used to take correction insulin, small correction insulin as and when required, and small correction to bring minor lows up. So our target has always been to eat meals at very good sugar levels. So her lunch, if it is there, she has to eat her lunch in a good sugar level. And so between breakfast and lunch, there was a check. In that check, that is a decision making check. In that check, we would do a small dose wherever correction is required to bring it back to the normal range for pre-lunch. So our entire family is on board with this plan, and we have also told to the school about it. So that is how she manages it. And for sports as well, we have a protocol in place. Like if she's having sports at normal blood sugars, she has a glucovita and then has the sports, and she maintains her sugar levels well. And she also knows the hypo awareness. She has hypo awareness, and she takes glucose as and when required. And she also tells the school to call me as and when she has a doubt how much insulin to take, what to do in this situation. Then they would call me and inform me. Sorry, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. Yeah, how were you able to bring in? Because it's not a single person job, or it's just not enough that you and your husband alone are in this. So I'm sure you would have brought in or other members on board, and including the school. So how were you able to bring in all of that? Because she's in multiple environments. You will need all of those environments to support her, right?
Yes. So we told to the school about what we follow, the ranges we follow, how to support her, and everything. Initially, there were some hindrances with this kind of thing. There was, even though the nurse was available, there was the need of nurse somewhere else, and they said, so what we said was just remind her that she has to check, because if she's a child, she's playful. So all she needs is a reminder. And we made her get used to finger pricking at the age of 6. So she started doing all these on her own. And coming to the snacks, we did not opt for the school food, although we pay for it. So we wanted to send food from our home, and even for the for whatever, for low sugar correction or whatever, everything is from home. And we make sure she also carries the varieties of foods to the school. So the school has a certain menu, like every day this and this. Uh, but when Sisti carries some kind of varieties, some kids are excited actually, because we were not following the exact way of nutrition, saying she has to take some carbs in the morning, she has to take roti or idli in the morning, or she has to drink milk and go, she has to drink twice a day milk. We did not, because we know we are covering the nutrition in the entire day plan. Right. We were, you may think we were a little radical in this. Yes, but we were also sending high protein waffles to the school. We were sending mug cake to the school for a breakfast. So which people would assume it as a junk, but it is not, because we were making with nuts and seed flour, and we were making with strawberries kind of fruit, and we were making with chocolate sauce and everything. So this is a kind of variety she's getting in the school, and everyone got used to it. She got used to it, everyone got used to it, and she is very much on board with what to do in these situations. There are some parties going on in the school where they have some drinks, they have some snacks and everything. In those situations, she carries her own food and she enjoys them, she relishes them.
So, I mean, I really love the idea where you say, why have idli? Let's have a cake for breakfast. And that's, I think, one of the biggest myths that we're busting when you come into a low carb kind of a mindset, because you look at nutrition very differently. And like you said, I think the most important point is through the day, you're covering the entire nutritional plan. You're breaking it up and
Yes.
you're covering it. Very important.
And we were also doing twice a day milk, which was causing extreme spikes to her. And then we thought, like, protein, calcium, and whatever nutrition is there, we'll get from other sources. There are so many other sources, so we need not confine ourselves to particular foods. We can be so creative.
Very true. Very true. I think the low carbers enjoy our food much more than all the others, because we end up eating something like a cake or a waffle very happily without guilt and getting
Yes,
all the required nutrition, right?
yes, and staying in ranges as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, what are the other benefits, Sirisha, that you've seen apart from stable blood sugars and Shrishti growing up pretty as a very healthy child? What
Yes.
are some of the other benefits that you've experienced in your journey?
I could say a lot of them. As you said, she's growing really well. She's 10 years old. She's 5'1" in height, with a good BMI, and her energy levels are quite good. Apart from that, and stabilized blood sugars, as we have always been
Yeah.
talking from the beginning, I would say the first one is peace of mind. Okay, so we are not chasing highs and lows, and diabetes is not controlling us. We are controlling the diabetes, and we are the owners of it. We are taking the ownership. And the second one is healthy eating for the entire family. We all, I mean, we are totally off the sugar and this junk food, and our entire family started adding more vegetables into the diet, more variety of vegetables, more protein. Even we did not eat protein so much. And to be frank, my husband and myself lost some weight, because probably we were not eating as much as protein as she was eating, but we lost the unwanted weight. And my daughter, on the other hand, she gained weight because of the high protein she's eating, and she was growing well. So I would say it was the entire family eating a healthy food is such a good thing. I would say without T1D, this wouldn't have happened. And the third one I would say is the people who manage in near normal blood sugars are only 5% or less than of it. I would say there are lot of low carb diets in the market. Like, a lot of people say, low carb and eat so and so fruit, low carb and eat herbs. There are different varieties of low carbs, and people say, I found a low carb and I ended up very badly. But the low carb that we are talking here, low carb, high protein, that is recommended by Dr. Bernstein, even though we are not exactly following to the T of Dr. Bernstein recommendations, we suited it, we changed it to suit our lifestyle. The standard deviation that you can get with this is the best. For example, some people might do sugar surfing techniques and then eat everything and get into the good ranges. Some people might do looping, eat everything and get into the ranges. But if you compare the standard deviation with this kind of approach is very good, because you're not, first of all, you're not giving something and rectifying it, right? It's like giving something and working to accommodate. It's not like that. You're choosing not to give to, we can, but we don't want to, we don't need to. So everyone say, type 1s can eat sugar. We can eat sugar. Why can't we eat sugar? But we don't want to. We don't want to lose our peace of mind. My daughter used to go to parties, eat the cake there, come back, and then she used to feel high sugar symptoms, headaches, and then we used to correct the entire night, giving insulins and bringing it back and giving something. It was like insane, because she just enjoyed 10 minutes of a party. It's not like that now. I should have covered this when you asked before, how does she manage outside food. Let me cover it here. uh, we send her the snacks that we make at home with her. If we happen to know the host of the birthday party, we try to match the same foods but with low carb alternatives. We have chips, we have drinks, we have pizza, we have chocolava cakes, we have everything in low carb alternatives. She used to carry that and she used to eat there as well, half of it and half of it, and she used to end up again with the same consequences. Then she understood it does not happen with one day. Say you don't do it and she follows it. It doesn't happen that way. You'll have to be very patient. It may take 1 year, 2 years. You have to patiently keep encouraging the children. And we never stopped giving it because she didn't eat. We never stopped giving it. We have been giving it all the time. And then she slowly started eating more of this and less of that. And then now she eats only this and not that. And she knows how to enjoy a party despite not having it. So she enjoys the actual party, the actual event, happiness. And if someone asks, why are you not eating it? If she thinks those are the people who can understand, she has the capability of explaining it from A to Z. She make them sit and explain. But if she thinks they are not the people who can understand, she says, I have allergy. Don't people with allergies do it? People with nut allergies, parents with children having nut allergies, don't they give alternatives to the children? Don't they say a no while giving the alternatives to the children? It is possible. So that is how she has been doing. And so I'm covering it in one of the advantages, because this is giving us peace of mind. And then we have clarity in diabetes management. Once you take off this big variability that is coming from high amounts of simple carbs, that clarity is there. And whatever the insulin requirement that is happening with hormones, or that is happening with the adrenaline, whatever child goes through, we can clearly see it in the CGM. We can clearly see it in the blood sugars, and then we make changes. We know it is not food. Previously, it was like, was it because of food or was it because of hormones? What we should do? We should increase the bolus or we should increase the basal. There was entire chaotic situation over there. And then managing exercise has become a bit easier. Because previously we were giving because everyone thinks a high carb has to be given to manage an exercise, both in terms of energy and managing blood sugars, because it is a common perception that exercise drops the sugar levels. First thing, exercise does not drop sugar levels for everyone and for every type of exercise. It is different. So that people should understand first. For someone for who exercise is spiking the sugars, they might need insulin there, not the high carbs. And for some, for some children, or for some kind of activities where the exercise is dropping sugars, they might be needing some glucose. Glucose immediately gives that requirement. We were giving higher carbs and we were also giving insulin to cover it. But we were not giving entire insulin. We were reducing, even though we are reducing the doses. This was causing a lot of confusion because her intensity of exercise is not the same every day. She was going for skating practice. She was going for regional level skating tournaments. It was not the same. Every time it was different. And she would, one day she would spike so high. One day she would go down so low. And I was always interrupting her, giving her something in between, some glucose water, this, that, and everything. With this LCHP approach, she can safely go to exercise in normal blood sugars by taking certain amount of glucose that would work for her. We have figured out how much it is. She takes that amount of glucose and goes to the activity, and she may return from the activity either in the same ranges or plus or minus maximum 20 to 30 difference. It has become a lot easier. So these are the advantages, and the predictability that I'm saying, high predictability. I'm not saying type 1 predictability happens in general in type 1. It could be very unpredictable, but there is a good extent of predictability now. And I would say many people also say we will change the diet once the child has grown to an adult or to a certain age. Then based on the requirement, the child may opt to do the changes. But I would say it is very, very difficult for the child to adapt at that point of time. And even if they try to adapt as well, they might have lost a lot of time. They might have spent a lot of time by then in the higher than required ranges. And it's pretty much the responsibility of the parents to start the kids, to make the kids understand from a very young age. So these are the valuable this is the valuable age, the precious age where the kids have to grow, and this is the age where you are giving good blood sugars as well as good amount of nutrition in terms of protein and micronutrients. So there has also been it's always there in the public, it's there that the obesity has been rising. 50% of type 1s have obesity now, and the number is rising at an alarming rate. And the A1C outcomes have been coming down despite the technology coming up. The A1C outcomes are coming down. So even in this scenario, I would you know I would request, I'm just an ordinary parent and an educator. I may not be the person to suggest something to someone, but if I can, I would plead the authorities to reduce the glycemic standards, because recently the A1C have the ADA itself has reduced the A1C targets for children, for people with type 1 diabetes, mentioning children are getting complications. It is a popular myth that children don't get complications. Children, nothing can happen to the children, but unfortunately, they have been spending a lot of time in these high sugars, and they might be catching up early. So I would plead the authorities, if I have any power to do so, to reduce the glycemic standards and to let the nutrition, let people understand the right nutrition. Even if someone is trying to reduce the carbs and trying to get a very good glycemic control, those people need support. Those people need support from the healthcare providers. That is what I would have to say. So sorry, I went from advantages to something else.
Well,
Anjali,
yeah.
hope I'm done with this. Is there a next question?
Yeah, I think no, I think you pretty much covered everything, because that was in fact one of my last questions to you. Wanting to
Okay.
know, a bit more about the work that you do as a diabetic educator, because I've seen a lot of this profiles outside of India, but I believe there are very, very, very few profiles like this within India, because T1 definitely is more complicated than T2, and most of them don't understand T2 itself. So you definitely need a huge amount of guidance and understanding around the entire T1 approach. So can you just share a little bit about what exactly you do as a diabetic educator, and what your role is, how you help other parents, and also maybe just a message, a short message to, I'm sure there are a lot of parents out there as well, something that you would like to share with them, if they have children sharing a similar condition?
Yes. As a diabetes educator, I would say the role of diabetes educator is to help anyone following any diet. Uh, like the same is with me. So I can, my role is to help people, help the diabetes education get into a lot of people, and there should be more people like me who would talk to the newly diagnosed, who would burst the myths, who would make them understand what is type 1 diabetes and everything. Those who are wanting to go to the low carb approach, we have all the resources to help them, but we need also help from the healthcare providers in that case. And the message that I would want to give to the parents is, in whatever diet you do not stop insulin. Do not stop insulin. If I have to tell bluntly, children die without insulin, and insulin is not bad. So like I said, there are many low carb things going on in the market, so everyone categorizes it to keto or a bad fad thing of a thing. But see the intention of that. The low carb diets that some people who are promoting herbs, they might be saying, they might be asking you to reduce the insulin doses because they perceive insulin is bad, because they think insulin is harmful to the body, and because very wrongly they also think reducing the doses means your autoimmunity is cured. There is no such thing like autoimmunity is cured. You follow a vegan diet, you follow keto diet, you follow any diet, there is no diet that can address the particular autoimmune condition. So they do not believe saying your autoimmune, because the doses are reducing, autoimmunity is getting cured. If you really want to get down the doses in a safe way, what you can do is you can improve the activities of the child and let them play in a very safe ranges and maintain healthy sugar levels. So diet and exercise are the two things that can improve insulin sensitivity. A random magical juice or something cannot improve your insulin sensitivity. It does not work in T1 for sure, because insulin sensitivity does not work that way. And I would say the parents have to analyze and check their blood sugars very often. I have seen parents checking very like once a day or twice a day, or they might have been diagnosed as T2D by mistake, and they might be checking even once a week. So that doesn't work. You'll have to check very frequently. And diabetes is not just about blood sugars, like everyone say. It is about having the good sugar control an integral part of your lifestyle. And also there is a popular saying kids first, diabetes second. If you're controlling the blood sugars of your child, you are keeping the kid first. That is called keeping the kid first. And the last point that I'm going to tell is, well controlled diabetes is the leading cause of nothing. Okay, so no need to worry. You control it well. You have the knowledge. Keep yourself updated with the latest evidences, latest researches. Keep yourself updated with the latest technology. If your kids are of suitable age, even involve them. They will understand even better than us. So this is the final thing I would want to say. Well-controlled diabetes is the leading cause of nothing. So please be on the top of it. You're on mute, Anjali.
Yes, yes. So great. I think that was a really valuable insight, and I love that sentence which says not having diabetes. I mean, diabetes is a leading cause to nothing. Is like brilliant. You don't have diabetes, you only enjoy great health, better life, and
Definitely.
a complete peace of mind.
If
Totally,
it's well
totally.
controlled, the kids are even better than non-diabetic people.
Awesome. I think your story is truly inspiring. As a mother myself, the minute I came to hear about it, I'm like, how can you manage it? Is the question. And I'm truly awed with the way you've managed Shrishti's welfare and well-being with diabetes, and also managing your entire family, because it's not a joke. Constantly supervising your child to ensure they are alert, they are healthy, and nothing happens to them. Plus, also managing the family front is great. I think coincidentally, or I would say by fate, today is also Mother's Day. Today we had
Yes,
such a
I'm very happy
beautiful
about it.
session. It was a beautiful, beautiful interaction today. Somewhere I think fate said, "Yeah, you needed this today on this Mother's Day," right? So
Yes.
I think that's it from my side, Sirisha. Let me open it up to the audience. I'm sure there are quite a few questions out there. Uh, I think I may have missed a couple because somehow I just got out of the meeting for a couple of minutes, got disconnected. But I think we do have a couple of questions on the chat. Otherwise, anyone else who's got a question, please you can unmute yourself now, and Sirisha can help you understand your question. Oh yeah, one of the questions is how are you managing it during the lockdown?
Um, in what sense? Like, because the child is always in front of us, it's even easier to manage now. And if they're asking about the physical activities that she used to have before, yes, there is that kind of we are lagging in it. There is not much physical activity involved, but we have made a schedule with her, saying this day she'll be doing this. She has trampoline, she does skipping, she does hula hoop. She was also wanting to do cycling, but we were not allowing because of the positive cases around. But she can also follow some videos and do it. So if you really want to, there are many ways of keeping the children active and healthy in the lockdown as well.
There is one question where someone is asking, Aarti Dinkar is asking if you can share a few educational resources around T1D.
Sure. We formed a group called Type 1 Thriving. We are a group of diabetes educators, uh, people living with T1D, and parents of caretakers of T1D. We formed a group called Type 1 Thriving. You can search about it in the Facebook. We started taking sessions on different topics. And our group is to focus on how to give healthy snacks, how to make low carb healthy snacks at home. It is useful for parents and children. So if you search with Type 1 Thriving, you will also see two other groups, low carb recipes for type 1 diabetes, where you see even children posting a lot of inspiring small easy recipes that other children can follow. Those kids are so inspiring. And then we also have a group called Type 1's Got Talent, where we showcase the talents of Type 1 children and their achievements. So if you look for Type 1 Thriving, you will know it. You will see three groups. You can two groups and one page that you can join. We're also on Instagram, and
On
also
Facebook, right, Sirisha?
yes, it's on Facebook. Yes, Type 1 Thriving. And today there is a quiz competition at 5 o'clock for specially designed for Type 1 children. We are having a May festival where we are having a quiz competition today, and then we are having scavenger hunt the next week, and then yoga. And then we'll be posting all the updates, the registration links and Zoom links, everything in those groups. So please join. And if you need any other resources also, please let us know. There is an email called type 1 thriving at type1.thriving at gmail.com, to which you can post your queries. So we are diabetes educators. We can help you with anything. It's not just about low carb. It's about anything we can help you. But if someone is looking to change their diet to a healthy, low carb, high protein diet, we are happy to help you as well.
So we have one question where Rupinder is asking for her diet chart. I think diet chart will not be possible to share because every individual has their own
Definitely.
diet patterns depending on an individual requirement. So maybe Mr. Rupinder, if you could get in touch with Sirisha after this, you could register on our D-Life website. We could kind of help you understand what should be the ideal chart or an ideal nutritional pattern that would work for that particular individual.
There are also amazing recipes in dlife.in. I have seen them, and there are amazing people in dlife.in. Very knowledgeable people like Sashikant sir, Anup sir, and there are many others who are examples by themselves, who have changed their way of managing health. They are absolutely very healthy, and I'm happy that they are spreading this message to many other people.
Yeah. We have, I think there's one more person who is raised out saying that they would like to get in touch with you regarding a friend's child who's also a T1 diabetic. Sneh, do you have any question that you'd like to address over the call right now, Sneh?
Hi, Sirisha. I just want to say you're absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for all of the points that you've shared today. I agree with you. Type 2 and type 1 are totally different. And I think type 1 is so much more complicated, and it's even more complicated when it comes to kids. And so it's been a real eye-opener for me today to hear how you've dealt with your daughter and how well she's doing and how amazing her blood sugar levels are. I mean, you know, to get them to the normal levels that you have, it's just out of this world. Amazing. And I'm going to make sure that my friend's daughter gets in touch with you, because she is having a rough time. And I think she will benefit enormously from your guidance. Yes.
Definitely. Thank you so much. Yes, we shall get connected to it here. I've given the email ID. You can also connect to me, message me in the Facebook. We can definitely get in touch.
Yeah, I think the main thing that I kind of got from you is that low carbs and the right kind of carbs are just very, very important. Probably even more important than type 2. Type 1, they really have to kind of think about it very carefully. And that's a really good message that came across really clearly.
Because you can see the impact of the carbs in the CGM. If you are wearing a CGM, you can definitely see the it's spiking despite calculating the insulin dose properly, despite waiting for some time as per the waiting time protocols and everything, because any fast-acting insulin cannot perfectly match the peak of the fast-acting carbs. Also, it is important to start with the protein first in any meal, and then start with vegetables. It also has fiber, and then you can go to the simple carbs if you're having it in a small amount. So also do not make any drastic changes, because I do not want I want this session to be an eye-opening session, but not wanting you to make any changes starting right now, because the sudden drop in A1C is also not advisable. You'll have to get slowly. When we started getting down our A1C, we were doing 0.5 reduction every 3 months. That's how we got from 9 to 5s. And then we stayed for some time in between to get everything in right. And even when you want to change, reduce simple carbs in a particular meal, because that meal is spiking so much for you, start with that meal. Start with one meal. Don't change all the meals at once. Some might do it very well, but they need to have very, very good knowledge and understanding of all the types of insulins, their profiles, their dosing and everything. But if not, always very, very slow.
Well understood. Well understood. Thank you so much for this guidance. I'm sure my friend's daughter, who's only 4.5, is going to benefit greatly from your advice and your support. Thank you.
I think we have 2 more questions. One is about taking supplements. Is it okay to go with certain supplements, maybe some vitamin supplements for the kids with T1D?
If someone is having a deficiency, then they would. What I do usually is I log in everything. I log all her foods in apps like Healthify Me or Chronometer or whatever, and I see how her daily profile looks like. So seeing that, I know where she is lacking in. Usually you get most of the micronutrient requirements from a variety of vegetables and the protein sources. That's why the protein content is also high. When the protein content is high, there are lesser chances of getting these deficiencies. So if someone is a vegetarian or a vegan, and suppose they are having certain deficiencies, then they might want to consider about the supplements. And yes, it has to be done under the guidance of a doctor.
We have a question from Deepika asking about the types of insulin, which one to use under different scenarios.
It depends on your diet and activities of the child. So usually endocrinologists decide that based on that. Suppose if you're having a lot of simple carbs in your meal, you might want to consider based on the spike you see in the CGM. If it is spiking immediately in 15 to 20 minutes or very immediately, then you might want to consider FIASC for that thing. Or if it is spiking after, if certain foods, you're eating protein first and you're eating carbs later, and it's spiking after half an hour or something, you might want to use NovoRapid. Or if someone is doing high protein and very less carbs in a meal, they might be wanting to use Atrapid insulin. So it totally depends on your lifestyle and the different profiles of insulin. Please educate yourself about the profile of different insulins. When is the action time? When is the peak time? When it is coming down? You please educate yourself and match it with the spikes you're getting in your CGM. And then decide what is a good one. And please do not change without speaking to your endocrinologist about it. Even the same thing is with the basal. You can do basal setting by yourself. We also we had a session in Hyderabad Sweet Souls about basal setting, and we would also be doing it in Type 1 Thriving as well. So you may want to see that session and understand how you can change the basal insulin as well if there is a requirement.
I think we have just time for one last question before we can close. So the question is your daughter a vegetarian, or rather, I would say, are you vegetarians?
Yes, we are
and what is your
lacto.
favorite? What's your favorite protein?
Okay, we are lacto-ovo vegetarians. We started with eggs after her diagnosis, but when we started, we didn't like it actually. I didn't enjoy cooking and she didn't enjoy eating. But when we wanted to meet the protein requirements and when I tried several times using several recipes, we got used to it and we all eat eggs now. So we are lacto-ovo vegetarians. And what is our next question after this?
I think what's your daughter's favorite protein?
Her favorite protein is I would say nut butter. She enjoys nut butter. She makes several recipes by herself using nut butters. She also uses eggs in them. So yes, she enjoys all her protein foods because she got used to it. They crave foods what they are used to, right? If when she was probably eating a lot of sugar, she might have been craving for sugar, but now she enjoys her protein food.
Wow. Brilliant. I think we may not have space for any more questions. So thank you very much, Sirisha. It was a brilliant program. It was a brilliant session from your side. Lots and lots of information. I think even for some of us dealing with type 2, some of it is very new, whatever you've shared about type 1. So thank you so much for the insight and such an educative way that you've kind of shared that information with us. It was lovely having you on our channel, and all the best to you and Shrishti, and wish her lots of luck for all the activities and having the best life ever.
Thank you so much. I also thoroughly enjoyed doing this session. and I see a lot of response from people. Ultimately, what my motto, and people like me, there are several people like me, their motto is to bring diabetes education to as many people as we can. And we don't want these myths going on. We don't want these false claims and false cures going on. We don't want all this. We want type 1 children to be thriving. So that's exactly why we created a group, type 1 thriving, because they are not just meant to survive with the highs and lows. Ups and downs are quite common of the life. We don't want that kind of a thing. We want thriving children. So that is the last thing I would want to say. And thank you so much for this session.
It was a pleasure. So I think it's time we could close the recording part of it.